They sold everything I built for $2 billion. And they didn't even have the decency to tell me. They fired me, their own child. They forgot one thing: I still own the code. I sat alone in a dark room, the glow of my laptop reflecting in my eyes. You think you know betrayal, you've only just begun. Rain streaked across the window as I stared at the newspaper headline. Tech empire sold in billion-dollar deal. Everything I built, everything I dreamed, sold like garbage. My own parents, my own blood, greedy, they never cared. I remember presenting the prototype to them, eyes bright with hope. My father's dismissive glance, my mother's polite smile hiding greed. They broke me, but breaking me was the first mistake. I closed my eyes, breathed in, and let the silence settle. Then a tiny smirk appeared, dangerous, patient. I sat at my laptop, lines of code scrolling across the screen. The heartbeat of the company, still under my control. They think I'm powerless. They think money is power. But power isn't dollars, power is control. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I began typing. Each keystroke deliberate, calculated. Every line of code a weapon. I walked into their office unnoticed, disguised, while they celebrated their deal. I didn't need guns. I didn't need threats. I needed access. I needed to remind them who they betrayed. I plugged in the USB. The systems began to glitch subtly, financial dashboards flipping, automated emails going out. Panic slowly spread in the room. My parents' smiles vanished. Their empire, their arrogance, all crumbling before their eyes. Arya, this isn't, you can't, my father stammered. I am who I've always been. You just made the mistake of thinking I wasn't dangerous, I said, calm, terrifying. I pressed a key. Screens flashed, ownership verified, access restored to original founder. Please, we can fix this, my mother whimpered. It's already fixed. For me, but for you, you'll feel the pain of every second you betrayed me. You'll watch your empire crumble helpless, I said. Lights flickered, systems shut down, financials disappeared. Media notifications pinged everywhere. I stepped back, composed, my revenge complete without a single punch thrown. I stood on the rooftop at dawn, looking at the city skyline. The sun rose, casting golden light. I smiled faintly, a warrior reborn from betrayal. They thought they owned everything, they thought they could erase me. But the real power is what they never saw coming, the code. My creation, my revenge. I sat alone in my apartment, sipping tea. The phone rang, unknown number. I answered. You've become dangerous, a voice said. Dangerous is my middle name. And I'm just getting started. I replied, smiling. Never underestimate the one who holds the code. The city didn't celebrate what I did, it didn't need to. Cities don't care about justice. They care about movement, money, noise. But beneath that noise, something shifted. I felt it the moment I stepped outside. Screens in shop windows replayed breaking news. Analysts argued, experts speculated. No one said my name, but everyone felt my shadow. I walked past people who had invested their lives into the company my parents sold. Engineers, designers, interns who believed in the vision I gave them years ago. They didn't know I was the ghost walking among them. They didn't know the system still answered to me. That night, alone again, I opened the laptop. Not to destroy, not yet, to listen. Servers whispered back like loyal soldiers. Error reports, panic logs. Emergency meetings scheduled at 3 a.m. The buyers were furious. The board was terrified. My parents were silent. That silence hurt more than the firing letter ever did. Not because I wanted an apology, but because it confirmed the truth I'd avoided my entire life. They never saw me as their child, only as a tool that learned too fast. I remembered being 16, sleeping under my desk, writing code while my friends lived normal lives. I remembered my mother bringing coffee, smiling, saying she was proud, while asking the next day if I could just add one more feature for the investors. I remembered my father taking credit in meetings, calling my work a family effort. Family, that word tasted bitter now. At 4:17 a.m., my phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. We need to talk. I smiled. Of course you do, I didn't reply. Instead, I scheduled something far more painful than a conversation. At exactly 9:08 a.m., every major client would receive a perfectly legal, perfectly calm notification. The core system they relied on was licensed, not owned, and the license was being revoked in 72 hours. No threats, no insults, just truth. Panic doesn't explode immediately, it creeps in slowly. By noon, stock prices trembled. By evening, the word Untouchable appeared in headlines. By midnight, lawsuits were being prepared. My parents finally called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. The next day, I showed up at the building again. No disguise this time, just me. Security tried to stop me. Their system denied them access. Mine didn't. I entered the boardroom where I had once been told to wait outside. The same room where they decided my future without me. My parents were there. Older somehow. Smaller. My mother stood first. Her voice shook. You didn't have to do this. I looked at her calmly. My father clenched his jaw. You're destroying everything. I shook my head. No, I'm taking back what you sold without permission. Destruction is messy. This is precise. He laughed bitterly. You think this makes you powerful. Stepped closer. No, it makes me free. They tried to negotiate. Money shares. Public apologies. I listened without reacting. Not because I was tempted, but because I wanted them to understand something before it ended. You taught me to build systems, I said quietly. You never taught me loyalty, you assumed it. I walked out before they could answer. Over the next 3 days, the empire didn't collapse, it hollowed out. Clients left. Talent resigned. The buyers realized they had paid billions for a body without a spine. Regulators started asking questions. The board dissolved into blame, and my parents. They lost something worse than money, they lost relevance. I transferred the code into a new entity. New name, no family, no board seats earned through blood. Only contribution, only trust. The same engineers followed me. Not because I asked, but because they recognized the vision. One night, as I watched the new system come alive, I felt something unexpected. Not joy, not relief. Peace, revenge didn't fill the hole they left. It just stopped the bleeding. Weeks later, I received a final message from my mother. I hope one day you forgive us. I stared at the screen for a long time before closing it. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for after the damage is done. It's something you earn before you pull the knife out. I shut the laptop and looked out at the city again. Somewhere out there, my parents were learning how quiet the world becomes when it stops needing you. Somewhere out there, people were realizing that power doesn't always sit in boardrooms. Sometimes it sits silently behind a keyboard, waiting for the moment everyone forgets who really owns the code. The city had not noticed me, but it would soon. Every morning as I walked the streets, the hum of computers, the glow of screens, and the endless chatter of people reminded me that life moved forward while I had rewritten its rules. I was no longer a daughter, no longer a pawn, no longer someone to be underestimated. I was the architect of a new order, quiet. At first, I let myself enjoy the subtleties of power. I watched the chaos I had engineered from my apartment overlooking the skyline. Brokers argued, CEOs questioned their decisions, lawyers pored over contracts that were no longer valid. My parents' empire, once untouchable, quivered under the weight of invisible hands. They had believed the world revolved around wealth and influence, but I had learned long ago that true leverage lies in control, in knowledge, in code. I began rebuilding, not just the company, but a legacy of precision and vision. The engineers who had once worshipped the name of my parents' brand now followed me willingly, eager to contribute to something authentic, something that mattered. We worked in silence, designing a system stronger than anything the old empire had offered, one that could not be sold or stolen. It was a fortress in digital form, impenetrable yet elegant. Every line of code a brick, every function a lock. And still, despite the success, I could not escape the memory of betrayal. Some nights I would sit by the window, the city lights stretching endlessly below, and feel the ghost of what was lost. My parents' faces haunted me not with anger, but with the bitter taste of wasted trust and misguided loyalty. They had underestimated me. They had thought that love could substitute for skill, and in that assumption, they had sealed their fate. Then came the first real test. News outlets began to report irregularities in my parents' former company. Investors panicked. Employees whispered about instability and potential collapse. Regulators called meetings. It was all predictable, yes, but I allowed it to unfold with a deliberate slowness. Revenge is not just action, it is timing, it is patience. Watching them scramble without lifting a finger was an intoxicating affirmation of strategy. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. A voice, familiar yet hesitant, spoke. Arya, we need to negotiate. Please, let's fix this before it's irreversible. It was my father. I listened quietly, allowing every word to sink in. They believed panic could bend me, that fear could make me vulnerable. But I had long shed such illusions. I replied simply, there is nothing to fix. The only mistake was thinking you could erase me. I hung up before he could protest. I spent days planning the next phase. The world was still turning, unaware of the invisible strings I pulled. I refined the code, creating redundancies and fail-safes that even the most sophisticated intrusions could not breach. The system now operated autonomously, capable of sustaining itself and my vision indefinitely. Yet I remained involved, as a guardian of what was mine. Despite my focus, doubt crept in on rare occasions. Could I trust those who followed me? Were loyalty and skill enough to maintain this fragile kingdom I had created from betrayal and blood? I tested them quietly, assigning projects that revealed both competence and character. Those who failed were shown the door, but the lessons were delivered without anger, only necessity. Leadership is not cruelty, it is discernment. Meanwhile, my parents' world unraveled. They fought each other in boardrooms, blaming the buyers, blaming each other, blaming fate. They had spent a lifetime building an image of control. Yet control is meaningless when the foundation is weak. They had assumed power was inherited. They did not understand that true influence must be earned and maintained. One night, I walked through the streets near their former headquarters. The building was silent, abandoned, its lobby deserted. I remembered the day I had been told to wait outside, to be patient while they made decisions about my life. Patience or betrayal had been my mentor, and now power was my reward. But revenge is a strange companion. It satisfies, yet it does not fill the emptiness left behind. There are moments, rare and fleeting, when I allowed myself to remember who I was before the betrayal, the girl who dreamed of building something extraordinary, who coded through nights filled with hope. And I realized that revenge was never about destruction. It was about reclaiming agency, reclaiming identity, reclaiming the right to exist on my own terms. The city began to whisper my presence. Not by name, not yet, but through the ripples of change I had set in motion. Markets stabilized under new conditions I designed. Competitors found themselves adjusting to standards they had never anticipated. Influence shifted quietly, imperceptibly. I became a shadow of inevitability, a force that could not be resisted, only acknowledged. My parents eventually reached out again through lawyers this time. They offered apologies, gifts, and attempts at restitution. But I had learned that some bridges, once burned, cannot be crossed again, not with them. Not with anyone who equated love and loyalty with ownership and entitlement. I responded with silence, letting the weight of their actions speak for itself. As months passed, I built not only a company but a culture, one that valued merit, integrity, and vision above all else. Those who followed me thrived, their faith rewarded, their talents recognized. I became a mentor, a strategist, a guardian of the code. I taught them that power is not about domination, it is about understanding, discipline, and responsibility. And yet each night I returned to the quiet room where my journey began. The laptop glowed softly, a reminder of what was lost and what was reclaimed. The code, once a tool of my livelihood, had become a testament to endurance and intellect. It reminded me that the most profound revenge is not the suffering of others, but the transformation of oneself into someone unbreakable. Finally, one evening, I sat on the rooftop overlooking the city. The lights flickered below like stars fallen to earth. I breathed deeply, feeling a calm I had never known. I had been broken, betrayed, and underestimated. But I had emerged not just intact but elevated, someone capable of shaping the world in subtle yet undeniable ways. The wind whispered promises of new challenges, new horizons, and I smiled faintly, knowingly. There would always be people who tried to take what did not belong to them, who misjudged the quiet, who dismissed the subtle power of knowledge and patience. I would be ready. For now, I allowed myself one final thought. True control does not come from fear, money, or influence. It comes from mastery of one's tools, clarity of purpose, and the refusal to allow others to define your worth. I had been betrayed, but I had also learned, grown, and ultimately triumphed. In that silence, I understood it fully. Revenge is not a moment. It is a transformation, and in that transformation, I found freedom. I stood watching the city breathe. Somewhere below, my parents still struggled, still fought, still hoped. I did not pity them. I did not need to. They had forgotten the girl who owned the code, and that was enough. Because now the girl who owned the code owned herself, and in that ownership she was unstoppable. The night fell deep and quiet. But I finally was awake. The city slept, oblivious to the storm that had passed through its veins. Markets stabilized under new parameters I had silently set. Investors whispered, competitors adjusted, and yet no one saw me. No one knew the extent of the influence I had exerted, the precision with which every move had been calculated. That was the beauty of real power. It didn't announce itself. It existed quietly, invisibly, and only revealed itself when consequences could no longer be ignored. I walked the streets alone, the cool night air brushing against my skin, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic, the occasional siren, the whispers of lives continuing unaware. I thought about the people who had once mattered, the engineers who believed, the employees who had been loyal, the friends who had abandoned me at the first hint of discomfort. I had learned that loyalty is fragile, but skill endures. And skill, when paired with patience, can reshape the world. I returned to my apartment, the same space where my journey had begun. The laptop sat waiting, its screen glowing softly in the dim room. The code pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, unyielding, and alive. I traced the lines with my fingers, remembering the nights I had stayed awake, consumed by algorithms and logic, by vision and hope. That code had been my fortress, my weapon, my salvation. And now it was my kingdom. The phone rang. Unknown number. My fingers hesitated, a fleeting echo of caution in a world I had learned to dominate. Aria, the voice said, calm, measured, not desperate. I've been following your work. You've changed everything. But there's more at stake than you realize. I smiled, faint curiosity, the rarest of human traits flickered within me. Who is this? I asked, voice steady, controlled. Call me an observer, the voice said. You're powerful. Yes, but you've only scratched the surface of what you can do. There are systems larger than your parents, networks wider than your empire. If you aim to survive, you'll need allies. Carefully chosen allies. I considered this. Allies, I had never needed them. I had relied on myself alone, trusted no one fully. But the whisper of possibility intrigued me. True influence isn't just control over one's own domain, it is the ability to shape, guide, and manipulate others toward a vision they believe is theirs. Perhaps it was time to learn the art of selective trust. Days passed. I began reaching out, not to my parents, never to them, but to those who understood precision. Engineers, strategists, ex-investors disillusioned by greed. They came hesitantly, watching me, testing me as I had tested them. I observed their skill, their loyalty, their ability to think several steps ahead. Only the most capable remained. Meanwhile, my parents attempted to rebuild their lives. They were careful, calculated, but painfully slow. They could not understand why their empire had collapsed so thoroughly, why their influence was diminished even as money remained. They sent gifts, letters, intermediaries. I never responded. Silence is a far more devastating weapon than anger. It forces the betrayer to confront their own failure without the comfort of engagement. The world outside my apartment was evolving rapidly, but I remained a silent conductor, orchestrating events without anyone noticing. I manipulated systems with a few keystrokes, guided decisions through subtle suggestions, and ensured that my legacy would grow while my enemies floundered in uncertainty. Power, I had discovered, was not spectacle, it was subtlety, it was control unseen yet undeniable. One evening, a former competitor reached out. "Arya, we've been watching your moves. You've dismantled my deals, redirected my clients. And yet I admire your skill. Perhaps we could work together." I agreed to meet, carefully, controlled, nothing spontaneous, nothing that could compromise me. The meeting was brief, almost ceremonial. We exchanged visions, aligned strategies, and I realized something profound: the network I was building was stronger than I had anticipated. Allies who understood my methods, who respected discretion, who shared a vision of precision and influence. Back at my apartment, I reflected on the path that had brought me here. From betrayal to silence, from patience to calculated action, from revenge to influence. The journey had transformed me. I no longer sought mere retribution. I sought mastery over systems, over people, over myself. The pain of betrayal had been a crucible, shaping me into something formidable, unyielding, unstoppable. Then came the first true test of this new network. An attempt to undermine one of my systems surfaced, a coordinated effort by former competitors, minor players emboldened by misinformation. The attack was sophisticated, but predictable. I anticipated their moves, countered with precision, and ensured that the retaliation appeared natural, organic, as if the market itself had corrected the disruption. The lesson was clear: control was not in brute force, nor in visibility, nor in wealth alone. True control was anticipation, preparation, and adaptability. It was the ability to foresee the consequences of actions, to manipulate variables before chaos could emerge, and in that I began to expand. Not recklessly, not with arrogance, but with calculated steps. New projects, innovative systems, ventures that no one had imagined. The city began to notice subtle shifts, technologies emerging from nowhere, solutions appearing seamlessly in industries that had long been stagnant, efficiency rising in ways that seemed almost supernatural. People whispered of a force behind it all, a quiet architect whose influence was felt everywhere but seen by none. And yet, for all the power and control, I remained vigilant. I knew betrayal could arise in the most unexpected forms, from allies, from rivals, even from those I trusted. I implemented checks, systems, redundancies. Every decision, every line of code, every relationship carefully monitored, weighed, and understood. The empire I had built was not just a business. It was a living organism, and I was its heartbeat, its mind, its silent guide. Months turned into years. My parents faded further into obscurity, their attempts at regaining influence unsuccessful, their names now mentioned only in context of past mistakes. I did not gloat, I did not taunt. Silence remained my greatest victory, my shield and my sword. One evening, as I walked along a quiet street lined with flickering lights, I reflected on the journey. I had been broken, betrayed, underestimated. I had transformed that pain into skill, that betrayal into strategy, that loss into dominance. I had taken what was mine, not through violence, not through intimidation, but through intellect, patience, and precision. And still, the city slept. Oblivious, unaware of the power that moved unseen among its streets and systems, I smiled faintly, knowingly. For I had learned the ultimate truth: power is not declared. Power is exercised, it is felt, often too late, by those who mistake appearances for reality. I returned to my apartment, to the glow of the laptop that had been my companion, my weapon, and my salvation. The code pulsed with life, its heartbeat in sync with mine. I touched the screen, feeling the flow of logic, strategy, and vision. Everything I had built, everything I had reclaimed, was now mine in a way my parents could never understand, in a way that transcended money, influence, and titles. Some nights, I still dream of them, my parents, who had once been my guides, my tormentors, my betrayers. In my dreams, they plead for understanding, for forgiveness, for guidance. And in those moments, I feel a flicker of the girl I once was. But it is fleeting, a shadow quickly consumed by the woman I have become: decisive, intelligent, unbreakable. I have learned that revenge is not an act, it is a transformation. And in that transformation, one discovers the true extent of control. I am no longer defined by betrayal. I am defined by mastery, by knowledge, by vision, by the quiet, relentless precision that moves the world in ways most never see. The city continued its rhythm below, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. I watched it, a silent guardian and architect, understanding that the greatest victories are not announced, they are lived. The world believes in chaos, in luck, in fortune. But the truth is far simpler, far more terrifying to those who depend on assumptions. Power belongs to those who see the unseen, act in the shadows, and remain unshaken by the world's illusions. I closed my eyes briefly, breathing deeply, feeling the calm that comes from knowing everything is as it should be. Not because the world favors me, but because I have made it so. Because I learned early that control is not a gift. It is earned, maintained, and never relinquished. And in that stillness I understood fully: the girl who had been betrayed, dismissed, and sold out was gone. In her place stood someone who owned herself, her creation, and the power that comes from patience, intelligence, and relentless vision. The night deepened, wrapping the city in silence, yet I remained awake, vigilant, alive. The storm had passed. But the calm that followed was not weakness, it was preparation. For I had learned that in the quiet, in the shadows, in the spaces no one sees, true power thrives. And now that power was mine. unseen, unchallenged, unstoppable. Somewhere below, the world would wake to new realities it could not comprehend. Competitors would stumble, investors would question, my parents would reflect, and I would continue silent, precise, untouchable. The code, my mind, my vision. I smiled. The city had no idea. But that was the point. The nights grew longer, the city quieter, yet my mind was never still. Each evening I walked through streets that seemed ordinary to anyone else, but to me, they were alive with the subtle currents of influence, the invisible threads of power I had woven without a single soul noticing. It wasn't enough to reclaim what was mine, I had to expand, to perfect, to cement a legacy that could never be stolen, never challenged, and never diminished. I had learned that true power lies not in money, not in connections, not in threats, but in control that no one even knows exists until it is too late. In the days that followed, I fully embraced the network I had begun building. Engineers, strategists, analysts, all those who had proven their ability to think, to adapt, to anticipate were now my silent partners in reshaping entire industries. Unlike the empire my parents had built, my system wasn't reliant on intimidation or appearances. It was built on competence, foresight, and precision. I trusted them to execute, but always with oversight. Every move, every calculation, every line of code, I reviewed meticulously. I had learned the hard way that trust without vigilance is a vulnerability. My parents were fading further into irrelevance. The empire they had clung to with arrogance and greed was crumbling around them, not because of market forces, but because I had removed the foundation they had assumed was permanent. Every legal maneuver, every negotiation, every desperate attempt to reclaim status fell flat. They did not understand the architecture of influence, they never had. Their mistake had always been to believe that legacy is inherited, not earned, and in their ignorance they had written the final chapter of their own story. I never interfered directly in their lives. I watched from a distance, letting consequences unfold naturally. They attempted to rebuild, sending intermediaries, lawyers, even gifts, trying to lure me into reconciliation, apology, or partnership. I ignored every attempt. Silence was the most precise weapon at my disposal. It allowed them to confront their failure without interference, without excuses, without me ever needing to justify or explain. The pain of their realization was far more effective than any confrontation I could stage. Meanwhile, my own empire grew, not through reckless expansion, but through careful, deliberate moves. New ventures, new technologies, solutions that others dismissed as impossible, these became my signature. The city began to feel the influence of my vision in subtle ways, efficiency in systems no one understood, productivity spikes in industries they believed stagnant, technologies emerging seemingly overnight. People spoke in whispers about a ghost architect, a silent hand moving the world with invisible precision. None of them knew my name, and that was how I wanted it. Visibility is vulnerability. Despite the success, I never allowed myself to become complacent. Betrayal had taught me that security is always temporary. I established fail-safes, redundancies, and monitoring systems far beyond what anyone could anticipate. Allies were tested continuously, not to humiliate but to ensure loyalty, skill, and reliability. The network I had built was resilient, adaptive, and intelligent. Together, we formed a system of influence and control that could respond to crises before they even appeared. My parents had believed money was ultimate power. I had learned it was nothing without structure, foresight, and the ability to act unseen. Months turned into years. My parents' names appeared less frequently in business journals, only in the context of past missteps. They became cautionary tales, reminders of hubris and short-sightedness. I didn't gloat, I didn't need to. The satisfaction of mastery is quiet. It does not demand recognition. Its reward is the certainty that you have built something unshakable, that your decisions ripple through the world with silent authority, and that no one can touch the foundation you've created. One night, a message arrived. No number, no sender, just a brief note. You are stronger than anyone imagined. But the world will always test the wise, be ready. I smiled faintly, I had always known this. The true challenge was not in reclaiming what was lost, it was in maintaining control once the initial satisfaction faded. Power is not a moment, it is continuous. Mastery is not achieved in a day, it is earned over years of observation, planning, and adaptation. I began expanding strategically. I reached out to select individuals outside my immediate network, people with skills that complemented my own. Scientists, programmers, analysts, even visionaries in unrelated fields. Each addition to my network was deliberate, chosen for intellect, discretion, and vision. I was no longer a lone architect, I was a conductor orchestrating a complex symphony of influence. Then came the test that defined the next chapter. A coordinated attack from rival interests threatened to destabilize one of my ventures. They had assumed my systems could be manipulated, that chaos would cause panic. But they underestimated the depth of my foresight. Every move they made had been anticipated, every variable accounted for. The attack was neutralized almost effortlessly, and in its wake my influence expanded further. The failure of my adversaries was a silent testament to the precision and patience that guided me. In that moment, I realized the final truth of my journey: revenge is never the ultimate goal. Revenge is the catalyst. It is the fire that forges strength, patience, and clarity. True power comes not from retaliation but from mastery over systems, over people, and over oneself. I had begun as a victim, then became an avenger, and now, I had become something else entirely: a strategist, a guardian, an architect of influence. I spent long nights reviewing the network I had built. Every code snippet, every protocol, every relationship had a purpose. Nothing was arbitrary, every decision reinforced resilience. Every contingency anticipated failure. And through it all, I remained calm, collected, vigilant. I understood that the world does not pause for those who seek justice. It continues, indifferent and unyielding. The only way to survive and thrive is to become the silent force shaping it. My parents eventually stopped reaching out. They had finally understood, in the most painful way possible, that the child they betrayed had transcended the limitations they had imposed. Their empire was a shadow of what it once was, and the shadow had been cast by their own mistakes. I did not need to intervene. Their realization, their failure, their diminishing relevance, all unfolded without my hand, yet with my influence always present, guiding the outcome invisibly. I walked along the rooftop one evening, watching the city lights shimmer like fallen stars. I reflected on my journey, from betrayal to silence, from patience to calculated action, from revenge to mastery. I had been broken, I had been underestimated, I had been dismissed. But in every wound, every moment of doubt, I had found clarity. Every betrayal had taught me vigilance. Every challenge had taught me foresight. Every act of revenge had forged resilience. And now I was free. Free from the limitations imposed by others, free from dependence. Free from the illusion that recognition is power. I had learned that control is far more valuable than wealth, influence more enduring than fame, and mastery more satisfying than vengeance. I looked out over the city, feeling the quiet pulse of life beneath me, sensing the invisible threads I had woven through its systems. I smiled faintly, knowing that I had become the architect of my own destiny, unshakable and unseen, yet undeniably present. The code, the network, the vision, they were mine, and I would protect them, nurture them, and expand them with patience, intelligence, and precision. The night deepened, enveloping the city in darkness. I felt no fear, no regret, no longing for the past. The girl who had been betrayed was gone. In her place stood someone who owned herself, her creation, and her destiny. She had learned the ultimate truth: the most profound revenge is not destruction. It is transformation. And in that transformation I had discovered freedom, mastery, and a power that no one could ever take away. Somewhere below, the city continued its rhythm, unaware of the invisible force guiding it. My parents, my former rivals, the world at large, they would never understand the depth of what I had achieved. But that was irrelevant. Recognition is fleeting, control is eternal. I had learned to act where others could not, to anticipate where others were blind, and to endure where others faltered. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the quiet strength that came from certainty. The empire of my parents was gone. My revenge had been served, but more importantly, I had evolved. I had become a master of influence, a guardian of systems, a silent force capable of shaping outcomes without confrontation. The journey from broken child to calculated avenger to master strategist had been complete. The city slept beneath me, unaware and different, yet subtly changed, and I finally was awake, fully, undeniably, and eternally. The code was mine. My destiny was mine. And in the stillness of that night I understood fully I was unstoppable. Never again would anyone underestimate me. Never again would betrayal define my path. I had risen from its ashes, forged in patience, skill, and relentless strategy. The girl who had been sold out, dismissed, and betrayed had become something far greater: a silent force, a master of the unseen, a guardian of her own power. And so the night ended, not with noise or chaos, but with quiet certainty. I had won. Not through vengeance alone, but through transformation. And in that transformation, I had claimed the one thing my parents could never sell, never steal, never destroy: myself. I was free, I was powerful, I was eternal. The code pulsed beneath my fingers like a heartbeat. And the world, oblivious as ever, continued on, forever shaped by someone who had been underestimated, betrayed, and forgotten. Until now.